Hey, I'm Oakley at Oakley Does Everything, and today we're going to repurpose these old rubber boots into these leather boots for our Jean Arc cosplay from the show Ruby. Stay tuned. First thing we want to do with our rubber boot is we actually want to cut off the front of it. That way when we go to add a tongue in here, it's not going to be impeded by it. It's going to get a better look to it. When you do this, you're going to go ahead and measure back to a point where the side of the boot no longer extends past your shin, and you're going to cut it all the way down to where the top of the boot meets your foot. Hey everybody, just jumping in real fast. I know that a lot of you are watching my videos without subscribing, so do me a huge favor, just hit that subscribe button there on the bottom. It means a lot to me and it really helps the channel. Back to the boots. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut out some faux leather that we're going to wrap this rubber boot in. I've already made some patterns for it, and we're going to go ahead and cut those out right now. And I'll explain in a second what your pattern pieces will need to look like. Alright, so here are 5 pieces, and each of them, these two are mirrors of each other. We have these 2 pieces that look like 2 L's. And these pieces are going to be going right here. We're going to be folding this piece over on itself, and that's what's going to be where our eyelets go for the bottom part. Same thing over here. Fold this over on this side, and it goes right here. We also have this long piece. It's just a long rectangle, and this is the length of from here on our boot all the way up to here and then some. So we always, I added extra length so that when I do the sewing, I can fold it over on top and have a little bit of edge that goes on the inside. So that's where this is our tongue. These pieces are for the sides of the boot. Now, each of these has a straight edge. You can just do a large rectangle with straight edges all around. If you notice that these have a little bit of a curve in here, that's fine, it doesn't really matter. But the straight edge is going to go straight up the middle, and we want to make sure that it is long enough to overlap the top edge so it covers the top. Now, it's okay that it doesn't go down here because this part will be covering up the very bottom of it, like that. Okay, and then this piece is the same thing on the opposite side. Okay, and the last piece you will need to cut out looks something like this. And what this is going to do is this is going to cover up our seams that these 2 pieces will create on the back of it. So kind of like a runner going up the top. So this will go all the way to the sole of the boot and then all the way up and over like so. And that's it for the patterns that we need for our boot. Now, you can make these your own. You might have a different boot than I do, so I'm not gonna make patterns of these, but instead, you can just cover this in duct tape, cut it in pieces, and figure it out that way. But just making oversized pieces, taking measurement of your boots, you'll get the same results. Now, your boot might have little edges and stuff like that, so for example, on the heel of this boot, it has a piece that sticks out, so that way you can, take a boot off with your other foot instead of removing it with your hand. So I'm just going to take a razor and cut that piece off. If you want to go through extra time and cut off, like if your boot has all these different ridges and stuff like that, you can go through and do that too. It's not really necessary, but that's up to your preference. But I am going to cut this piece off the heel because it does stick out quite a lot, and then we will start gluing our pieces onto the boot. That's all you need to do, just kind of flush it up. Now we are going to take our hot glue gun, and the first thing we're going to glue on is our tongue. And when you do this, we're just going to lay it here with enough overlap, and we will come back and snip some of this in so it can actually go inside the leg itself. Alright, so we have that hot glued to the boot, and ideally you want to get this as smooth as possible. One way you can do that is you can cut little strips off the edge or cut into it. That way it's got room to flex. But you don't want to cut into the centerpiece about here, because that is going to be visible. So you want to leave that intact. I did trim off some of the edge so it didn't go all the way down to the sole. We don't need that, so I just took care of that right now. The next pieces we're going to put on are the leg pieces. If you did the same idea as I did, where the fabric slopes off to one side, make sure that the narrower side is on the top and the longer side is on the bottom. Again, you can just do a rectangle is fine, and you'd get the same results. We're going to go ahead and center this on the back, and again, this does not need to go all the way to the bottom. We can leave some room on the bottom. We just need to have it so that we have enough room to flip it over the top edge here. Okay. We do need to make sure that it goes low enough so that our pieces down here cover that all up. So rather than doing a line of glue down the center, I'm actually going to start on the top and go side to side. That way I'm going to get a smoother finish with the faux leather when it's all done. Now that we have that glued on, we're going to go ahead and roll over the edges and glue those to the inside. So you might be able to see this part of my fabric goes a little bit over the edge, so I'm just going to trim up a little bit, making sure to not go past the center line. Alright, and I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Now with this one, you want to make sure you come as close as you can to overlapping on the back side of this. If this doesn't end up overlapping exactly perfect, that's fine, because that's what this piece is going to be for, is it's going to cover up this seam anyways. But we want to make sure that this is center and wrinkle free as much as possible. Alright, so this is currently what it looks like. We have our tongue, and I just tucked it away inside of the boot to get it out of the way. So we have our tongue here. We have our sides wrapped so that the seam is in the middle and the edges are overlapped like so. See that? Okay. Now the next thing we're going to be doing is our side pieces that are going to be covering the bottom sides, as well as our bottom laces for the boot. So what we're going to do, same idea, is we're going to start with the bottom heel, glue that down, wrap it around a little bit. This inside corner piece is going to be going on the corner where the leg meets the ankle area, and we'll glue this together, and I'll do a close-up glue. Now you could go ahead and glue this piece onto the back and be done with it and just have a simple leather wrapped boot. And then of course you'll need to add your eyelets in for the shoelaces. But I'm actually going to take this a step beyond, and this is where it's going to get tricky. We're actually going to put stitching into this boot, and that's actually going to add an extra measure of security, because hot glue to the rubber doesn't actually hold very tight because the rubber is very smooth. It peels off very easily. This tutorial is meant to have the boots stitched with a thicker yarn material. It looks like this. And we're going to go ahead and put stitches in this just like you would if you were doing leather stitching. And the reason we're not putting this back piece on yet is because we're actually going to do a stitch all the way across the back around here. And this piece is going to go over top of it, so we want to add a stitch here first before we actually put this over it. So what you're going to need for your stitches is you're going to need a leather punch like this. This has 4 prongs. You can buy them anywhere from a single prong to 2 prong to I think 6 or 8. But I just have a 4-prong. You can buy this at Hobby Lobby for like $7 or $8. Even cheaper if you have a discount coupon. So you need that. You need a mallet so it actually goes all the way through. And you're also going to need some wood, like a 2x4 or just some scrap wood you have laying around. And this is going to go on the underside of this. That way you don't punch through and into the other side. Find where you want to do it. Make sure that you are doing it far enough in from your seam, your edge. That way, in case it pulls it, pushes it, manipulates it, you'll still have enough room for it to go through and have that clean edge still. So I'm going to start here at the corner. I'm going to work my way around to the opposite side, and then I'm also going to go ahead and do some stitching that goes all the way up and around this side, around the top, and back down the other side. I would also suggest that you start on the inside of the boot. That way you can get some practice. If you mess up, it's going to be in a spot that people are less likely to see. And then that way, as you get better at it, you get around to the outside of the boot, and it's going to look a lot cleaner. And just be confident, get a good hit on it. That way it doesn't move around on you. And it may not go all the way through, so you got to take a couple more taps. And you definitely want to make sure that you get all the way through it, because otherwise it's going to make the sewing and stitching a lot harder to deal with. And I got it all the way through, so now I'm just going to pull it back out, being careful not to rip the leather with it. And there you have your 4 dots. So I'm just going to overlap one and continue punching holes all the way around. Now that I'm on the heeled side, I'm actually going to take my 2x4, put it in the vise, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. Here we have our 2x4, we're going to put it in the vise. And I understand not everybody has a vise, but this is going to be the easiest way to do this part. Then we're going to go ahead and put our boot over top of it like that. Now it's going to give me something hard to hit it on. When you go to do your stitches along this front edge here, you can put your stitch however wide you want, but keep in mind that we're going to be putting eyelets in here, and you want to make sure that your eyelets are going to be about halfway in between the edge here and where your stitch is. I am going to be making mine 1.25 inches off the edge. I'm just going to take my calipers here, and I'm just going to do a little edge. That way I kind of have an idea of where I'm punching and my stitches are going to go. I'll do that on this opposite side as well. And if you're using faux leather, this should scribe a line pretty well. It might be hard to see on the camera, but it's a very thin line that you're going to be following. And you'll also need a scribe line going across the top here. It can be the same width as that. I don't think it should be though. I think it should be a bit narrower. Based off of other real boots that I see, this is a good depth for your scribe line. Make sure that this is not under here, because if this is under here when you're punching, you're going to get a bunch of marks on your tongue. Ask me how I know. Now for the stitching, we are going to need a fair bit of thread. When you go to stitch this, you can go, and if you don't make it all the way, you can tie it off and then start at that point and then keep going. But if you just want to call it safe, give yourself a lot of thread or string. This might be considered string, but if you want to give yourself a lot of thread just to make sure, I have done about 12 feet or so. Alright, and then I'm going to cut that off. And you're going to tie your needles to each end. The needles I'm going to be using are from a kit that Singer makes, an assortment of thick needles that are used for heavy upholstery or thick upholstery. And for this stuff, this is pretty easy access. You can get to it all throughout this part of the boot. And so I'm just going to be using some straight needles. We'll be using some hooked needles later, but for right now, for this process, Straight hooks are fine, but you don't really need the big ginormous one, which is this guy. These are just a little bit thinner. We don't need super thick ones because we already punched the holes in it, and if we use anything bigger than this, it's just going to cause more resistance and harder to actually feed it through. So I'm going to go ahead and put my needles on the end of my string that I just cut, and I am going to go ahead and start sewing. Stitching? I'm going to start stitching. Just like last time, I'm going to be starting on the inside of my boot, on the inside corner here, through the back, and then up the other side, so on and so forth. And so long as you punched all the way through, this should be a little bit easier. After you get your string halfway through, you're going to go ahead and do the outside string first. Get that in, pull that one all the way through. And be careful, you might see how it twists up like this, and it gets all bunched up. I like to just go ahead and put my finger through here and keep tension on that. That way it doesn't bind up, and then you end up with a knot. Alright, so there's our first one. Then we're going to take our inside string and we are going to feed it in that same hole, push it up through the other side, making sure that you don't punch through leather that you didn't make a hole for. Okay? And there is one, and then we repeat that starting on the outside string. But I'm going to stop talking and get to stitching, and I'm going to time it and let you know how long it takes me to do this much. One hour, 32 minutes, and 52 seconds. So, definitely not a quick job. But, look how good that looks. Check that out. Oh yeah. I'm pleased. Alright, now is the point where we take this piece and glue it onto the back here, and that's going to go ahead and snug up against the bottom, and this piece is going to run all the way up that seam and over into the inside of the boot like that. Okay, so when you do this, just make sure that you're covering up this seam right here, and that this should be somewhere around the top of this arch, and so long that it covers up the bottom of the sole of your boot, and then that way you can go and cut off the extra later. So we're going to hot glue this in place now. Alright, now we're ready to go ahead and work on our next set of punches with our little fork prong here. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the same measurement that we did for this part, and we're going to apply it here from this front edge. So just doing a little bit of a scribe. Now we have our stitch line here and our scribe line here. That's what I meant to say, scribe line. And now we're going to go back to our prong and our mallet, and we do need to go ahead and go from this corner where we stopped right here. That was our starting and our stopping point. We're going to go from there, and I accidentally did that wrong. I added some punches there, but good thing this is the inside side of the boot, so you're less likely to see it. So I'm going to go ahead and start here, working my way down. And this is going to be the hard part of punching, because it is hard to get something on the underside of this to come into contact with. But I do have some smaller scrap pieces of wood that I'm going to stick down in there and try to cause some resistance on the back side. When you do this, make sure your tongue is away from all this, that way it doesn't get a bunch of marks on it. And hit it with confidence. Start on the inside, work your way out. So for the next part, we're going to be hammering at the bottom of the shoe. I made this quick little jig, I don't know what to call it, but this insert to go inside the shoe That way it can go up as close as I can to the inside edge, and then that way I have something a little sturdier to hammer on. Alright, so I'm back to hand stitching, and I'm going to start with my straight needles, because right here I have easy access to the other side, but once I start actually getting on the inside part of this boot, I'm actually going to switch to hooked needles, my thicker ones that I have in that Singer set, because it's going to be easier to grab it rather than to try and go straight. It gives me a little bit more leverage to get it through. I think I punched some pretty good holes, so it should make it a little bit easier to go all the way through. This is the hardest part of this. So start from the outside, then you're going to have to finagle around a little bit, and you might miss a time or two in some of these holes that are further in, but you just gotta take your time, get through it, use your hooked needles, because that's gonna save you a lot of time. So I'm starting at the corner here. I'm gonna go down the top part right here, and then I'm gonna go from down here and go all the way back up this arch and up the left side of that. And then I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. Let's get to it. I'll time it. Time lapse. Alright, so just stitching the inside part of what we just talked about, that took me roughly an hour and 45 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and do the outside now. I'm not going to film it, but I'll time it and I'll let you guys know how long that goes. And then when I come back, we'll talk about sewing up the tongue and putting in eyelets. At this point, we have finished hand stitching the main body of the boot. And it took me, I believe it was another hour and a half to do what I just did off camera. In total, so far we're at 4 hours and 42 minutes of hand stitching, but we're not done. And again, this is advanced stuff. This isn't simple. This is if you want really nice, fine detail, if you want something to look more like a real leather boot and you don't want to go buy real leather boots. And now the next thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and start hand stitching our tongue. When you do this, there are going to be some adjustments. You need to make sure that the top is at the same height or slightly higher than the top of your boot. So you're going to have to fold it over somewhere around there. And then also, this from the top to the bottom is going to need to taper downwards. So the top is going to be wider than the bottom. And you just need to figure out how you want to do that on your own. I want the top of my tongue to be 5 inches wide, so I'm going to go ahead and fold that over a little bit like so, right about there. I'm going to use clothespins to put this in position, because you don't really want to use pins on faux leather. It just doesn't work very well, and obviously you put holes in it. So here we have it 5 inches wide at the top. That's how I want it to be. And then we're going to have the taper come down roughly about there or so. So I'm going to go ahead and put some clothespins there just to see how that looks. And that's the general idea, and you can change this to however you want your boot to be. Just make sure it's wide enough to finish going all the way around your leg when it's all said and done. Now's the point, if you have anything that's extending up over from the back side, you want to go ahead and trim that off. So I'm just going to take some fabric scissors, give it a snip. For stitching, we're going to use a smaller needle. We don't need the larger needles just because we're only going through the leather and not the actual rubber. So you only need one needle and the string, and we're going to tie a knot off on the opposite end of the string. We have a larger knot there. We're going to start on the back side of this, starting as far down below as you can. So when we do this, we're going to go ahead and start on the back side, about a 1/4 inch in from the edge that you want. Pull it all the way through so that your knot catches here. Then we're going to go to the front side of it. On the front we're going to do a longer stitch, so here's our previous exit. We're going to do about there. Okay, that gives us about 1/4 inch in between thread. Go ahead and pull this through. And the knot for your needle is a little hard to get through, so you just gotta yank on it sometimes. Alright, so there's our first stitch. And then on the back side, we're gonna do much closer to the string, so about 1/8 inch or so, maybe a little less, right next to it. And then again on the front side, 1/4 inch, maybe a little wider. Like so. And there's our first 2 stitches. So I'm going to do that all the way up to the top here, and then I'm going to do something a little different going across the top, and I'll show you that when I get there. Alright, we came up one side right there. It's looking really good. Now what we're going to do is once you get to the top, or where you want it to stop, now we're going to go ahead and do a kind of like a zigzag pattern, or more of just like a diagonal pattern. But you can do whatever. If you want to do the same stitch just going right across, you can go ahead and do that. I wanted to add a little bit of variety to the top, make it look a little bit thicker. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, find a point, we'll go right here, and so this is where I came through, so I'm going to go stagger it a little bit, maybe do about 3/8 of an inch, and there, and create a slashing effect. So it has this diagonal to it. If I hold it up right, that's what it ends up looking like. Now I'm going to go ahead and do that all the way across. It's going to be out from the back, diagonal down through the front, like so. And we're just going to do that all the way across. Alright, that is going to be it for the hand stitching of our rubber boot made to look like a leather boot. And we put in, or I put in, a total of 5 hours, 23 minutes, and 5 seconds hand stitching this thing. It's not easy, but when this is done, it is going to look awesome. I already think it looked awesome because, I mean, with the tongue stitched like that, it's looking good. I'm very pleased with this so far. The next thing we need to do is put in eyelets. Eyelets are what the little holes that our shoelaces are going to go through, and we're going to be putting 3 down here on either side of our little flappy part, and then we're going to be putting a total of 6 running up each side. And this is what we need to do that. So to make the holes for the eyelets, maybe using a couple different methods. For the holes that go actually through the rubber, I'm actually going to use a stamp, and this will create the same size hole as the eyelets I'm going to use. So where I have to go through rubber, I'm going to use this hole punch, and then for down here, for the bottom 3 on either side, since I'm only going through the leather, I'm actually going to use an X-Acto knife and just cut a little cross hole in there, stick the eyelet through, and then clamp it in. As you can see, I have dots marking where I actually want to put my eyelets, and you can do that however way you want, but I just divided it up and then did halfway between the edge and the stitch. That way it gives a nice symmetrical look all the way up and down. And when you're making your eyelets, you want to make sure that you have the same amount on both sides. So for the top part of the boot down here, I have 3 on either side, and running up the side of the boot, I have 6 on either side. So let's go ahead and punch those holes and put some eyelets in it. So I'm going to put my hole punch over top of my hole and just give it a good strike. And it goes through real easily without any problems. Now we have our first hole. And then we just do that for all of them. If you've never used a pair of eyelet pliers before, this is how it works. We're going to put our eyelet onto the cap there, the side with the peg sticking up, and then we just squeeze it together, and that's going to expand the back side and grip on the opposite side of our material. Hey guys, jumping in. I have no idea what happened, but apparently I lost the footage to put the leather cap on the toe part of the boot, and yeah, I'm not sure what happened, so really sorry about that. But basically you can either take a piece of leather and form it to that toe by soaking it in water, or you can cut it into a pattern so that when you glue it together it makes an arched piece over the toe, and then you just rubber cement it to it. But yeah, sorry that I can't find that, but that's basically what you do. Alright everybody, that's going to be it for this build. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in more genre art cosplay, there's a playlist right here, and if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. That button's right here. Other than that, have a wonderful day. See you next time. Bye.